Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's spoke, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Hi there, and welcome to Pint-Sized History. I'm Joe.
And I'm Zach.
And we're back for part 2 of the Korean War. And Zach has left us on a cliffhanger of literally reaching the war. And now we get to enjoy... Well, enjoy is the wrong words, but we get
to enjoy the bloodshed. Yeah. we get to mesmerize ourselves over the killings and the brutality.
We get to listen in and find out a lot about the stuff. And like I said in the last episode, I feel like I know virtually none of this. I mean, I know...
You do now.
I do now, and I'm learning more and more.
Part 1 of everything.
I learnt that Kim Il-sung is an interesting individual, according to Zach. I don't think he's that interesting, but apparently he's very interesting.
You're flirting with a dangerous line, Joe. Like I said before, they novichoked someone in Disneyland, and you're out here saying that Kim Il-sung is not an impressive guy. North Korea, I think Kim Il-sung is potentially the most impressive man ever.
Nice. And his grandson, whew, what a legend.
Great haircut.
Great haircut. Yeah. Little fat boy, as Trump calls him. Trump called him.
He called him little fat boy?
What did he call him? Fat man or something? Or Rocket Man? He called him Rocket Man, but then he also called him fat, I think. Which is extremely...
Little rocket fat man.
Which is really rude from Trump, like, considering, it's not like Trump's particularly skinny. Like, that is a bit outrageous.
He is, though, 6'4" or something, right? So it's quite imposing.
Doesn't make him not fat. He has a coat button.
Yeah, no.
What would you have? That button's staying there, obviously.
What button would I have?
What button would you have?
Sushi button.
Sushi button?
Maybe and here's something quite topical about Korea, a buldak ramen button.
Well, I'd have a Crate Brewery beer with my button. And speaking of Crate Brewery beers, we're sponsored by Crate Brewery for this episode. Zach, what's the code?
The code is, for these delicious beverages, Pint-Sized 15. That's PINTSIZED 15, not 50.
Please buy some beers so that we can continue the sponsorship. That'd be great.
They sent us 6 crates of beer, and I got through them in like a week.
6? You only gave me 2.
5 crates, sorry.
I was going to say. So you would have a sushi button?
I would have a sushi button, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? There's so many things I'd love just on a dime. A beer button.
A beer button would be nice, but then you're not drinking while you're on the job.
A packet of crisps button.
You can have a drink after the job, but you're not drinking.
I love a packet of crisps.
Crisps would be nice.
A salmon sashimi button.
How about sausage rolls?
If you're getting a button, you're not going to go for sausage rolls, though, right?
The button's there, so it's going to no use if you don't use it for something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're not going to get rid of the button from underneath the White House desk. They're going to keep it there, so you better have something that you want.
Right, so we're in Korea. For part 1, we talked about the end of Japanese rule. It's split by the Americans and Soviets, and then like the 2 strands, the 2 nations, South Korea and North Korea. We have North Korea under the rule of Kim Il-sung, a communist dictator who started this cult of personality, which only really became super popular about 15 years ago, and 10 years ago when Vice started doing documentaries on it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was like the 2010s where everyone's got super obsessed with
Well,
John
it is a very interesting place. Sure, it might have been more in the popular culture after
I guess Dennis
Rodman
back in the 90s.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like North Korea was an unknown place. Like, people did talk about how weird it was there. Obviously, there was less information about the place, but it's not like they didn't know about it.
Yeah, no, fair. And then South Korea, ruled by Syngman Rhee, this democratic dictator, with quotation marks, who's essentially doing everything possible to smash communism, if it exists or it doesn't exist. And it probably does, but just not to the extent that we think it does.
Yeah.
That's quite like revisionist history, for me to think that it doesn't exist. I've got no real reason to think that the communist uprisings weren't as big a thing as he made them out to be. But my thought process is that if you take away our Western media skew and our objectivity,
which is difficult to do,
it handily serves as a good excuse for fighting North Korea, that we're battling communism and they're everywhere and we got to smoke them out and liquidate them.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it's probably not as big a deal, but I haven't conducted the research, and anyone that has can probably fill me in better
they're
than
not
I
listening.
can.
They're not listening to this.
They listen to the first bit, like, what the fuck is this shit?
What are these clowns talking about?
And the Chinese and Soviets give their express support to Kim Il-sung, Kim become the son, to embark on this unification of Korea and smoke the South Koreans and win the war and unify the 2 countries and root out democracy and capitalism. And that's where we ended the first part. So let's get right into it. Okay. Straight into the war.
Here we go.
The war starting. Do you know much about the actual war itself?
No, Man, how many times do I have to say?
Yeah, but you
I
said
know
twice.
nothing.
You know nothing.
I
Genuinely
just
nothing.
I just know that it's a tug of war. That's literally all I know. I know that and you explained this in the first episode, but they literally just go back and forth until one side is almost conquered, and then they somehow bring it back, and it ends up pretty much where they started. That is pretty much all I know.
Well, it spoiled it for everyone, but cool.
You said it in the
I
first
don't care,
episode.
Joe. It's just it's not good etiquette, is it? To spoil to all the listeners, the viewers.
What the hell?
On June 25th, 1950, Kim Il-sung launches the invasion of South Korea.
Wow.
The North Koreans, similarly to Soviet military... Wow.
That's my best Gordon Ramsay. Wow.
So the North Koreans, similarly to Soviet military doctrine, which was superior firepower and overwhelming firepower, launch a massive artillery barrage in front of the 38th parallel.
Wow.
And at the same time, they cross the parallel into South Korea. Stop saying wow. It said the justification for the war was that...
sorry.
Fuck me, man.
I'm sorry, I'm ruining it. I'm sorry.
I'm a professional here. I'm trying to get this done. And you're wow.
I just remembered the clip of all of Gordon Ramsay's wows and it's made me laugh. No, not Owen Wilson.
Is that Owen Wilson?
No,
Owen
that's Owen
Wilson
Wilson.
and Gordon Ramsay's wows are quite similar.
No. Owen Wilson is more of a wow, and Gordon Ramsay is
he's more of a wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
Gordon Ramsay's like
Wow.
and he's like
Wow. What's short?
and there's
Wow.
one way he goes wow. You got. I'll send it to you later. If you haven't seen this, go to YouTube and search Gordon Ramsay wow compilation. It's genuinely quite funny.
I think they'll follow that up with an Owen Wilson wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then Pint-Sized
Wow.
history. Go back to Pint-Sized history after that. But the Gordon Ramsay's wows trump Owen Wilson's wows.
They said the justification for the war was that Republic of Korean Army troops attacked the KPA and would also provide evidence of this attack to the international tribunals and the US. They said, we can't. We obliterated the army so badly that there's just no evidence left of this army. So you take our word for it. They attacked us and now we're going to invade them and unify the entire country.
Yeah.
The Korean People's Army First Corps, with 53,000 men, drive head-on towards Seoul, and the KPA Second Corps, with another 50,000 men, pushing down the other side, so the east of the country. Seoul's on the west. The east is like where Busan is.
Yeah, two-pronged attack.
Yeah, two-pronged attack. The KPA were also supported by heavy artillery, whereas the Rocker and tanks as well, whereas the Rocker had no anti-tank weapons and no heavy artillery, basically small guns, small arms to defeat this like monstrous army in front of them. Mm-hmm. And they were absolutely battered by the North Korean army.
Wow.
Like, I always thought now probably the South Korean army is one of the best armies in the world, you'd think, right? It's got like a massive reserve force because
If it's anything as good as their K-pop, absolutely.
What's your favourite K-pop?
I actually have no interest in
Don't like
K-pop.
Blackpink?
No, I'm not. I'm not okay. I know you and your lovely girlfriend Carrie are into your
Yeah,
K-pop.
BTS, man.
But no, I'm not. I will.
I do.
But I will say.
Army.
I do like South Korean shows. I love Squid Game. I love Parasite was excellent. If you've seen Parasite,
See Parasite.
it's so good. I mean,
that-
South,
was it
South
in,
Korea, South Korean TV and film is right up there.
South Korea have some fucking good exports.
I find it really interesting. South Korea is kind of like the UK in a way that we are not the most powerful person on the world stage, but we punch above our weight in TV and movies and music. Yeah, our influence is really strong.
Carrie loves K-drama.
As she should. K-dramas are excellent.
On June 27th, Syngman-rhee evacuates Seoul, and the Republic of Korean Army detonates the Hangang Bridge on the south of Seoul to slow down the KPA, whilst South Korean citizens are fleeing as refugees across the bridge, killing thousands of people while they are crossing this bridge.
Jesus.
In spite of this, Seoul falls, and the KPA continue their advance. On June 28th, the city is gone. It's now under North Korean rule for the first time. Seoul is not under the hands of South Koreans in the war. First time, no, I say that. Despite this, the Rocker keep fighting, and Rhee does not surrender. And apparently, I'm not sure if this is at the exact same time, but Rhee massacres a load more political distance. So basically, in their evacuation south, just goes that anyone who's suspected of it, you're done, you're dead.
Suspected of it,
Yeah,
Jesus.
and kills thousands of people, basically. Somewhere between, apparently, the Bodhi League massacre, 60,000, so not just at the Bodhi League massacre, I think in total, 60,000 to 200,000 apparent communist sympathisers are killed because of their apparent leanings. And this was apparently covered up by the South Korean government for 4 decades, until the 1980s, where they decided to launch a committee, or 1990s, they launched a commission to figure out the war crimes committed by the South Korean government during the war. So this is something that all Koreans are taught about, and it's pretty horrible. So the Rocker then pulls south of below basically the North Korean army pushes in quickly. They push the Republic of Korean army all the way back to Busan, or Busan as we call it in England. It's Busan in Korean, and they push them back to this like 230-mile long kilometer line just outside Korea. It's called the Busan perimeter.
Okay.
And this is where it's a pocket in the southeast of Korea where all the troops of like the UN and South Korean nations are now it's their last stand, basically.
Right. So they're involved at this point. I thought that they got
Not yet. No, the UN aren't in the Busan perimeter yet.
Oh.
But there's a couple of US divisions there.
Right. Okay.
So not by any means a large army, maybe just enough to withstand the pressure, and they're going to hold basically the line until they get reinforcements coming in. So President Truman's caught slipping. He's really concerned about security in Europe rather than what?
President Truman's caught lacking.
He's caught lacking, man.
He's caught lacking.
He was really concerned with Yugoslavia.
Doing niche.
So he was really concerned with Yugoslavia and Tiso falling to Soviet influence.
Mate, what an idiot.
So cares more about that. So he's not got even in his mind right now that this could be a thing, or there's going to be a war. The Soviets right now are literally on the borders in Germany, in East Germany. There's tanks not tanks on the borders yet, but like East Germany, West Berlin, East Berlin. They're basically pointing guns at each other essentially. So he's got bigger problems than Korea in the middle of nowhere, which he doesn't care about.
Yeah.
But they quickly come under the impression that if they let Korea fall, it could lead to a disastrous chain of events that could lead to World War III. And I imagine that mean like the fall of Japan, the fall of Taiwan.
Well, that's the worry, isn't it? It's like if all these countries were to go willingly, and that's kind of the same argument that people have with Ukraine. Is like, sure, it's South Korea, it's in the middle of nowhere. In the minds of Americans or Europeans or whatever, why is it important? Why should we spend our money there? Why should we put people in the ground? But the worry is often that.
What next?
Yeah, if they win there easily, what next? Where does the Soviets put their power into next? And if Japan were to fall, that would be so bad because
Absolutely,
they would lose all of their influence in that region, and they need influence.
I think that's why like really aggravates me when I read online on social media about people talking about like it's Ukraine. Why are we there?
Yeah,
I mean you just said that, but like
why
are we involved there? But like if that doesn't happen, Russia's going to invade Latvia.
Yeah.
They're going to invade Lithuania. He said he wants to re-establish the Soviet puppet states.
And then I've even seen people go like, yeah, fine, but he's not going to come to the UK.
Doesn't matter.
It's like that's just I hate that mindset.
Like Zelensky said when he was in the Oval Office with Trump, he was like, "You're not feeling it now, but you will feel it."
Yeah,
and he was totally
absolutely
right to say that because like they will feel it.
Trump did not like that one bit.
He did not, because when they get to Poland, they're a NATO member, so they have to get involved. They'll have to defend Poland.
Will they?
Poland's a pretty strong army. I think we talked about this recently, but
well, no, I was just going to say it. We're not pint-sized politics, but Trump is clearly not as big a fan of NATO as every president has been before. So I don't actually think there's a guarantee.
Which is a damn shame.
I don't think there's a guarantee that Trump would back Poland. The EU would, and we would.
Yeah.
But and probably Canada, but I don't think the US would.
Would you be happy if Russia invaded Poland, the UK declared war on Russia?
I thought you were just saying, would you be happy if Russia invaded Poland?
Man,
yeah, I'd love it. And the UK declared war.
But would you be glad for on that side of history?
I would.
We're standing up for
for the UK's decision. I don't think it would make me happy or sad. I think I would just be worried.
About getting drafted.
Not for me personally, but I just think that will affect everything in the country. Even if it's not me that's getting drafted, it's the society.
I'll be
your
chucking
friends.
white flowers at you when you won't go to war.
Yeah, I would be really worried. But I do think if Poland were to be invaded by we're actually just fully going pint-sized politics now. But I do think if Russia were to invade Poland, the UK would have to do more.
We have to.
At least more than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, we get drafted for sure as well.
And that would mean you and me on the front lines.
We're the exact age, because typically in war, I don't know why I'm looking at the camera, but in war, armies don't like enlisting and drafting young men.
Yeah, this has changed. The mindset has changed.
Yeah.
They no longer want teenagers and young men because they're so crucial to the workforce. So instead, the mindset of conscription and who you would bring to a front line first above anyone else is now older men.
Yeah, 26 to 32 or something like that.
Yeah, and if you don't know our ages, which you might not because we haven't disclosed it much, me and Zach are both 29.
29?
About to be 30. So we are right in that mix of ages. So
that was a New Girl reference, by the way, if you didn't get that.
Okay.
Cool. That's Korea. So they're scared that after Korea, Japan's going to fall next communist state, and they saw Japan as the counterweight to China and Soviet Union. So because of the proximity to Japan, they're like, literally just because of Japan, they're like, we got to act. We got to do something. We can't let a neighbor to Japan be a communist state.
Yeah.
So at the time of the fall of Seoul, the Soviet Union communicated to the US that it wouldn't move against the US if it put forces in Korea, which is pretty crazy. Like there was a communique where they were just like, yeah, you can get involved here. You can put troops on the ground. That's fine. We won't put the Red Army in there.
Yeah.
It's okay. But he didn't say anything about China.
Here comes China.
Classic China. So horns.
The China train.
So when the North Koreans invade South Korea, the UN condemns the invasion and they pass Resolution 82, which recognises the invasion as illegal. Soviet Union boycotts it, but the UN agreed to provide military assistance to the Republic of Korea. So it's not just a US thing; it's massively a US thing. Like basically 95% of it is the US. But there's also a good deal of substantial influence that the UN have had. And like they're giving money and troops on the ground. We'll get to it in a second. It's a question for you, Joe. So get ready. Stop getting those brain cogs twirling.
It's ready to go, brother.
But before that, on June 27th, Truman orders US air and naval forces to help after the invasion. And US industries are mobilized to help support and supply the war.
Here come the Yanks.
They attain congressional support for approximately $12 billion of military action, which is how much today? $12 billion?
$12 billion in
70 years ago?
Ooh, a lot. Over 100?
Yeah, 157 billion. So well done.
157.
But at this point, the US Army is not the same as it was in World War II. In World War II, it had 12 million men or something, and now it's got like 2 million at most.
And let's be real, if you fought in World War II as an American and you came back to the country, you're not staying.
Get me out of there.
Yeah, I'm not doing that again.
Like especially if you're in the Pacific as well. You're like, fuck that. That was horrible.
So I'm not surprised that they're.
Obviously
it's going to always drop after a world war. Like, why would they have so many men anyway? But point being, not many are going to actually want to stick around.
Yeah. So Truman orders General Douglas MacArthur to begin supporting South Korean troops. Do you know who he is?
Douglas MacArthur.
Yeah.
He was the. I'll probably get this wrong. I don't know if he was the head of the Navy, but basically he was what Eisenhower was in Europe, but in
bang on the money
in the Pacific during
supreme...
World War II. And Douglas MacArthur is an interesting and dodgy guy, but you will actually probably seen a photo of him if you don't know, because one of the most iconic photos ever is the photo of after the bombs are dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. He specifically makes sure that he takes a photo with Hirohito, because in Japan, kind of similar to Korea and their love of their dictators, Japan had this belief that the emperor was a descendant from God, and therefore they had him in this divine light and he could do no wrong. So what MacArthur wanted to do when he met him was to humanize him, have this tall American stand next to this quite weedy, small Japanese man.
I tell you.
And look,
Hirohito's my guy.
Hirohito's got one of the ghosted names, man. He's Hirohito. That's such a cool name. I love the name Hirohito.
We know you love his name.
Literally search it up. Search up MacArthur Hirohito. It's literally just the two of them standing next to each other, and it's incredibly important because it's kind of to I guess unbrainwash Japan into believing that this so dramatically.
Yeah, totally right.
And so that's who it is. And so at this point, he's now the head of the military.
He was the supreme commander of the Pacific Forces in World War II.
Yeah.
So he was responsible for the island hopping campaign, and he's very used to this side.
So a very important man.
Very important.
He's like he's Eisenhower.
Absolutely the perfect person for this job, which is pushing into similar terrain and climates as the islands, and jumping into Korea. And a lot of it will be like Marine and Navy led and stuff like that. Truman likens the aggression of the North Koreans to that of Hitler at the start of World War II. He stresses, maybe having learned from Churchill here, that appeasement is not an option.
Yeah.
Churchill tried hard to tell everyone that you can't appease. Yeah. And here we are today.
Appeasing.
Yeah. We really have got politically this part. So,
this is probably the most pint-sized politics episode we've ever done.
Yeah, it's because it's recent and it's quite relevant.
It's fascinating. I got to say, as much as I am finding the news incredibly frustrating and pissing me off at the moment, I will say that it is fascinating. This period of history, as much as
it will be in the textbooks.
I wish, and this is probably the most political thing I've said in the show, but I wish, and you could probably have guessed, I wish that Trump hadn't been elected. And I'll be honest with you, this should have been expected, really, what's happening right now. But it is, even if you dislike him and even if you can't stand his politics, it is fascinating to see this. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
It's fun.
Like we.
Oh no, it's not. It's not fun.
It's not. Yeah. What I'd say is about the current politics state of the world is that I am not as big into politics as you are. I would argue that
really you don't work in.
No, well, you work in Parliament, for example. I work in the news.
I don't even like politics.
What I will say is that I'm not particularly interested in a lot of things, but I do find foreign policy and the state of affairs and balance of power worldwide fascinating. And I must admit that after 80 years of America being the go-to man, we will defend all our allies and we will go and fight anywhere, anytime. We will fight with the Yanks. To now be this kind of isolationist country within.
That's what they were before World War II.
Yeah, before World War II they are, and so it's just to see the switch literally in weeks. Like it's just happened like that, and it's fascinating to watch because it's like, what does happen? Who are your allies now? Canada has this most fascinating moment. I'm kind of glad in a way that Canada is one of the nations that's really having this existential crisis because because it shows everyone else. If Canada are literally their closest ally in the sense that they've been with them every single step of the way since Canada was and the USA have been neighbors basically, and they will do whatever. And suddenly they're apparently. The Liberal Party, which is Trudeau's and the new guy, I can't remember his name, Carney?
Carney.
Carney,
Former Bank of England governor.
I find it really interesting that they were apparently doing awful in the polls. And now, because of this nationalist, fuck America, we are not letting them become the 51st state. We're not becoming that. Apparently they have soared. And now they're like, it's much closer.
There's a lot more complexity to that than that.
Of course, but I just find it so fascinating that because they're the closest, every other country, including the UK, has to think, well, if Canada's getting it, we could be next. We should not rely on the Americans. And then as the UK, we've just left the EU, which I'm sorry to go political again, but that was a fucking mistake. So now...
Sorry, Joe. What's this got to do with the Korean War?
It's got nothing, man. Just let me rant, man. Let me fucking cook. So we've got no allies in Europe, although we feel closer to Europe than ever at the moment. And we've got America that are doing what America are doing. And it's like, what do you do? What do we do now? What as a country, as a place? Who do we back? Who are we with at this point? I can't stand what America has become. And I'm like, where do we look? Where do we turn to? That's all I've got to say.
That climb down was epic. You were screaming. That's all I got to say.
Oh, brother, I can't.
I feel your frustrations.
The overarching point is, it is a fascinating time at the moment, and I may be finding it quite frustrating, but it is interesting to talk.
You don't look affected in the slightest.
I'm tilted. If you can't see me, I'm at a slant, brother.
He's red as fuck.
I'm tilted.
Red in the face.
Yeah, I am. Maybe it's the beer. But speaking of,
delicious great beer.
Make sure to get some pint-sized beers. They are great.
The colour of it is beautiful in that glass, I got to say.
I agree, man. And you should have that too if you bought one. Yeah. So pint-sized 15. Anyway.
Back to the Korean War. Mm-hmm. So the US have decided to join and start mobilising and support the South Koreans. Whilst the US are mobilising, the North Koreans are winning battle after battle. They have an engagement with some US troops stationed in South Korea, the Battle of Osan, which is like a reservist group there stationed there, just like as they have places stationed all over the world, the US. The KPA captured Pyeongtaek, Chonan, Chochiwon, before capturing Taejon at the Battle of Taejon. I'm probably pronouncing these names terribly. They lost the Battle of Taejon, but they secure this... They lose the battle, but they have a strategic victory, and that they kind of like hold the North Koreans back, forming this perimeter around Busan. So the Republic of Korean Army and the US, like the troops they have there, the limited amount of troops they have there, have formed this perimeter, 230-kilometer perimeter around Busan. This is my quiz question, Joe. I've come back to it.
Oh, finally, here we go.
So, Joe, the United Nations Command is established in 1950 for the Korean War. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me which 16 countries helped the war effort in the Korean War? 2 of them are no longer part of the United Nations Command.
Okay, hold on, that's really broad. What do you mean by helped?
Troops on the ground.
Oh, so literally troops fighting. 16 nations. Okay.
If you can go in numerical order, that would be even more impressive.
Numerical
so 1.
Order? USA?
Yeah. 2.
Japan?
No.
But are they in there? Are they in this? Oh, they count it separately.
They've just been conquered. It's World War II. They're demilitarized.
Oh, of course. Right. I thought, yeah, okay.
So 2.
The UK?
Yes, the UK, yeah.
Okay.
3.
I wouldn't have thought our influence was that big.
3,
Never
another
talk
Commonwealth neighbour.
about it. Oh, Commonwealth. So Canada?
Yep,
So I've got USA, UK,
Yep.
Canada,
Yep.
Australia,
yep,
France, obviously.
yep.
Got to
13th.
be France. They're not pissing about. I was going to say West Germany, but surely not. They need to chill.
No Germany.
There's no way West Germany's getting involved.
There's no German troops here.
Okay.
So you've got first,
Portugal.
second.
Go on, give me a bit of Portugal.
Nope.
Norway.
Nope.
There are many Europeans.
There's a good few, but
Italy.
no. Also, a victim of the Second World War.
Yeah. They need to chill as well.
They gotta chill.
I keep naming countries.
An aggressor in the Second
and they're
World
the ones that's like, look, we need troops, but like you guys can.
you
guys
chill.
can chill. You're fine.
Germany,
We don't need
Germany,
you.
Japan, Italy. You guys chill.
You guys are alright.
The rest of
fine.
you, you're
fine.
good. You're
the
good.
rest of you, come on, let's go. Okay, France, England, Belgium,
Yep.
Netherlands,
Yep.
Ireland. No,
No.
because Ireland hate getting involved in that shit.
Famously.
Wait, there's not many European countries left. Australia, New Zealand.
Yep. A US sort of puppet state in Southeast Asia.
Oh, what, like Philippines?
Yep.
Is there any I'm missing?
I'll tell you the whole list.
Okay, go on.
Okay, literally putting troops on the ground.
South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa's one.
Come on.
In 1950, the United Nations Command is established for the Korean War. And as part of that, 16 countries joined the war effort to support the Korean army. Those 16 countries are, which you failed to guess,
USA first.
USA first, UK, Canada, Turkey, Australia, Philippines, Thailand, Netherlands, Colombia, Greece, New Zealand, Ethiopia, France, Belgium, South Africa, Luxembourg.
Luxembourg, okay. I didn't expect that.
No, you didn't expect half of them.
That's crazy.
So back to Busan. Busan's now the second largest city in Korea. It's right on the southeast coast, so basically as close as you can get to Japan as possible. It's a vital port city and the last bastion of rocket and US resistance. So the UN scramble a force to hold the perimeter, and the North Koreans start experiencing logistical problems because they've travelled so fast, so quickly across the entire country that they can't really keep fueling this effort. That's always the thing with lightning wars, is that it catches up to you, like it did with the Germans at Dunkirk, basically. And
the Germans were great though, because they had meth chocolate. So they kept going for a few
3 days.
Let them cook.
And the UN Far East Air Force Bomber Command has started pounding North Korea, like absolutely pounding it. They basically get such obscene air superiority so quickly and have B-29 bombers like running runs basically all day, every day, that there are no military targets left to attack. So they just start dropping napalm on villages. It's absolutely gruesome, but it's apparently nice. What happens to North Korea, which is nowhere near the size of Germany, is worse in terms of bombings made from Air Force than what the Western Allies did to Germany in World War II. It's the whole country was rubble. So this is a much smaller country, and it's on that same scale, the same amount of ordnance. And in the Busan perimeter, the terrain is like rough, mountainous, it's really hard to fight in, and it makes movement really difficult. And the aim is to hold the line while the UN builds up its forces to launch a huge counteroffensive. The Americans start bringing in Shermans and Pershing tanks alongside rocket launchers, artillery, AA, close air support, new jet-powered F-50s and F-54s, B-29 bombers. And they start wreaking havoc on North Korean armies. The army was also slowly bolstered by a British Commonwealth Brigade, and the rocket starts to swell its ranks too as people from Busan start joining as reservists and volunteers. The North Koreans worried. They can see the build-up happening, and they're like, we've got to stop this. So they try to conduct a double envelopment of the UN forces and drive towards Masan and Pohang. By September 12th, the KPA forces lost almost half their men in the push, and they're driven back essentially. The battle was, for the Busan perimeter, is like the big battle that happens this time. Right. And it wasn't just one battle, it was a battle. It was like a series of large scale battles that happen all across this 230 kilometer front. But then the UN begin outnumbering the KPA, and they start pushing them back a little bit. Kim Il-sung orders his army to complete the war by September 1st, which leads to the Great Nakatong Offensive, but the offensive ends on September the 15th after the KPA lose all their army and basically start getting decimated. So here is the eureka moment of the Korean War. On the 10th of September, the US X-Corps land at Incheon, which is a South Korean port city just bordering Seoul. It's the closest port to Seoul. They land with 40,000 men, the 1st Marine Division, 7th Infantry Division, and 8,600 rocket soldiers. And they, in 2 days, push all the way through Seoul and cut off, basically, their aim is to cut off the North Koreans, because North Koreans are all at the south of the country now, and Seoul is near the north of South Korea. So they're basically trying to pincer them and get them stuck in this this huge pocket below Seoul and above Busan. But the KPA start withdrawing because they're aware of that. They tactically withdraw and they leave Busan. They go back across the 38th parallel. And on September 16th, the UN forces push from the Busan perimeter at the same time. So it's basically 2 spearheads coming, one from Seoul and Incheon and one from Busan. And they're trying to meet and cut off the North Korean army. But North Koreans have just hightailed it and got out, I imagine, with intense casualties at the same time.
Yeah, you'd imagine.
On 25th September, Seoul is recaptured, and on 29th September, Ri's government is reinstated in South Korea. On the 30th September, Chinese Foreign Minister Zhu Enlai warned the UN forces that if they crossed the 38th parallel, it would threaten Chinese involvement in the war. Regardless of that, Douglas MacArthur decides to send X-Corps above the 38th parallel into Pyongyang. He demands KPA surrender. They don't do it. They capture Pyongyang and they take 135,000 prisoners of war. KPA is gone. KPA is defeated. There's basically no North Korean army left.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's so funny that like they are defeated, yet the war continues, because this is what happens with proxy wars. Even if your army's defeated, the people that are
the Chinese
essentially
volunteers
helping you
coming
are
over.
oh shit, we need to save them, so they end up fighting instead of you.
Yeah. So they push them all the way back to the Chinese border.
Yeah.
And the Chinese are like,
we can't do
We
that.
can't
To be fair, and you kind of like, if that was us, we would be, because it's like
NATO.
you don't know how far they're going to go. Maybe the Americans are bloodlust and
The Americans are like incredibly hawkish and aggressive.
Yeah, so like why wouldn't you think that maybe they might even go into China? So I actually do get it.
And Douglas MacArthur in his rhetoric is anti-China as hell.
Really?
Like he wants to nuke China basically. Oof. Like not yet. When the Chinese get involved in the war, he's like, no. This war can't end. We've got to invade China. We've got to invade North Korea. We've got to invade China. We've got to nuke China. Yeah. We have to defeat the Russians. He's power hungry, gone mad with just bloodlust. And the Americans push all the way up to the Yalu River. The Yalu, I think, maybe Yalu. Yalu sounds more correct, but I think Yalu is what's written as anyway. And the Chinese side, this is the backstop for their intervention. And if you come near that, we're going in. But it doesn't matter anyway. Even though they're getting near, they don't wait for the Americans to withdraw. And on 25th of October, the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, the CPVA, enter the war with Soviet Air Force providing air cover. Because that was part of the conditions of the Chinese getting in, was that they would join the war if they had Soviet equipment, Soviet training, Soviet pilots. There were actually, so in the Soviet Air Force, because they didn't want the Americans to see that they were Russians in the war, or not Russians, the Soviets in the war against the US, they dressed up in Chinese uniforms and fought undercover as Chinese pilots, basically. That's which funny. Is insane. So they're basically dogfighting. First, like jet-powered dogfights that happened were between Soviets and Americans, with Soviets dressed up in Chinese outfits, basically. And it's crazy that we get to this point where China, the US, the Soviet Union, and North and South Korea are in a war, and it doesn't blow over to World War III, right? Like, it's insane. So the Chinese went to the war, and you're looking very relaxed there. I've got to say, you got your arms about stretched.
I'm chilling, man.
Is that because the Chinese went to the war now, and you can relax?
Yeah, thank God. I was worried before. I was like, fuck, they might actually lose this war.
Yeah.
But thankfully, Chairman Mao's got his head screwed on.
Yeah.
He's not doing this.
I think he's got his head screwed on.
He's going in.
So the Chinese are in the war, and they're fighting well. They're really good. Basically, it's the depths of winter at this point in time, and the US Army are completely exhausted. The 8th Army, which is like the main army involved in this, are dilapidated. They have no winter clothes, and it's really cold in North Korean winter. Right, super cold.
I can imagine.
It's close to Siberia, isn't it? Sort of.
Yeah. I can imagine it's horrible.
Yeah, so 300,000 Chinese troops cross the border to take on the 100,000 beleaguered American troops at this point in time, and they start defeating the Americans and the South Koreans basically at every battle. They defeat the Rocker at the Battle of Onjong. They encircle and attack the US 8th Cavalry Regiment at the Battle of Unsan, and inflict heavy losses on the US 2nd Infantry Division at the Battle of Chongchon River.
Battle of what?
That doesn't sound right. And the US decided to retreat and cross back over to the 38th parallel. They're like, shit, we gotta get out of here. So that's what's happening in the West.
Right.
And in the west of North Korea. And in the east of North Korea, the Chinese People's Volunteer Army, the PVA, are winning more battles of Chosin Reservoir. They force Mighty X-Corps to retreat. And the US just ramp up. They're like, we've got to send more forces. It's like swelling and swelling.
Yeah.
In December, the British Army evacuate Pyongyang. We did it. We're great at evacuating people out of places.
Yeah, we had that experience.
4.5 million North Koreans, apparently, in this evacuation Pyongyang, fled south.
Nice.
So
we cooked.
yeah.
Let's go.
We're
2-0, baby.
2-0.
Goering, have that.
Yeah, it's Suckerman nil. British.
Suck that,
2.
Goering. What's your Luftwaffe doing now, you mug? Context. Goering fucked up in Dunkirk, and we got all our troops out in World War II, which is what I'm referring to.
There's also another great evacuation by the Americans here. I think they evacuate 14,000 North
Well, let's
Koreans.
not give it too much. Come on now.
But 4.5 million, man.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a lot.
we smashed it.
Yeah. And on the 17th December, China basically decided, Kim Il-sung, you've gone as far as you can. You've been a bit shit in this war. We're taking over command of the Korean People's Army. So the Korean People's Army is now the Chinese.
That's fair. And you said this guy was impressive.
I rest my case. The UN then presented a ceasefire to China at the Battle of Chongchon River, which is rejected by the People's Volunteers Army. They think they're invincible at this point. They just won like 4 battles on the trot.
Yeah.
So while the Americans and the UN were like, we'll stop here, 38th parallel, it's fine, we'll end the war. China, you proved it, you're pretty strong. China said no. And they launched the third phase offensive on New Year's Eve 1950. Following the street, they basically pushed the Americans all the way back behind Seoul again and capture Seoul for the second time on the 4th of January 1951, which is my birthday. So,
cool.
So it's about like February 1951, and the Chinese have launched a massive offensive and taken Seoul, pushing the line basically of North Korea all the way down into South Korean territory, and the UN counterattack. And this is like
Nice.
This is the second counterattack. We've had the Chinese get involved.
Hell yeah.
They pushed the Americans all the way back from Seoul, so from the Chinese border to Seoul, and now the UN are attacking it. They're counterattacking back.
We fancied our odds. We were like, let's cook.
Yep.
Here we go.
So at this point in time, at the UN counterattack, there's about 1 million Americans fighting alongside 600,000 rocket troops, but there's also millions of Chinese and North Korean troops now in the fighting. But on 7th of March, the 8th Army now refueled, resupplied, reinforced, and revitalized. I actually did write that. I don't know why. I must have been drunk. Attack with Operation Ripper, recapture Seoul again. So city's ruin, and the pre-war population of 1.5 million in Seoul is down to 200,000. And the PVA are expending their supplies. They've taken so much ground so quickly. They've launched their offensives, and they went really far. They went from their border basically all the way to Seoul, and they're pretty exhausted. So they're starting to struggle with logistics.
Yeah.
Basically, all sides now are starting to slightly look for a way out.
Yeah.
Ceasefire negotiations, armistice negotiations are sort of beginning to like creep into the forefront of the mind now.
Yeah, the conversation.
Yeah, it's at this time in April 11, 1951, where Truman relieves MacArthur of command because, like I said, MacArthur wants to nuke the war. He said that if they invaded North Korea, China wouldn't enter the war. China entered the war, so he was wrong there.
Yeah.
He also wants to nuke China and destroy China, and Truman's like, I can't let this happen. So as a sort of way to appease the Chinese a little bit, gets rid of MacArthur. General Matthew Ridgway then takes command. He's a man who fought in the Sicily invasion. He fought in Italy and Normandy in Battle of Bulge, so he's also got great credentials. So the world has changed in this 5 years, that you have generals that are fighting in World War II to launching invasions of Korea, which is a former Japanese puppet state, with generals that landed in France in D-Day. It's crazy. But back to the fighting. So Ridgway then decides to launch more counterattacks. So they retook Seoul, but it's sort of stalemate. And Ridgway decides to push the KPA and the Chinese People's Volunteer Army back past the 38th parallel, back into North Korea again. He does that well, and then the Chinese launch another counterattack, and they bring 700,000 men in the 5th phase offensive.
Bloody hell, that's a lot.
There's a massive amount of men at this point. This offensive, it's an enormous offensive, but it's eventually halted at the no-name line north of Seoul, with huge casualties for the PVA. So whilst they're performing really well, the Chinese at the start of the war, at this stage, they're kind of just like throwing men as very like classic communist state tactics. It's just human meat wave
meat grinder type stuff.
Chuck men and get little grains.
Yeah, use your expendable workforce, basically.
So apparently the casualties for the PVA in these battles in the fifth phase offensive, by the end of April, apparently they lost around 60,000 men, which compares to 4,000 men for the UN. So it's a ratio of 10 or 15 to 1, depending on some figures. But they don't stop there. They send another 500,000 troops in the second wave of this same offensive, but they're halted at the 28th of May. And the offensive ends in the 22nd of May. So it's like the huge Chinese fifth phase offensive, which is their spring offensive, ends in the 22nd of May. And the Chinese are planning their third phase of this spring offensive. They're not done yet. They want to push more. They want to take some more ground. But they're caught off guard when the US Army counterattack again. So Chinese counterattack, the Americans counterattack back.
Yeah.
The Chinese counterattack back.
One big counter-offensive.
And now the Americans are counterattacking again.
Over and over, yeah.
I appreciate people listening to this are probably losing a bit of the focus of where we're up to right now. So I'll just do a little bit of a summary. Okay. So, like, the Chinese army got involved in the war. They pushed the US army back behind Seoul, and the UN and US and South Korean forces pushed the Chinese and North Koreans back to the 38th parallel. But they want to go beyond the 38th parallel now.
You described this earlier as like a big tug of war.
You can see why now, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, take a little, give a little, take a little, give a little. It's just madness. And like, you forget at the same time, like, these incremental gains that they're making are at the expense of hundreds of thousands of
exactly.
genuine human lives. So it's like
mind-blowing, really.
It's like similar to like First World War. Apparently it is at this point like descending into trench warfare.
Yeah.
So it's like very similar to World War One of just like making absolutely no gains for no reason to maintain a status quo, which will be the same in 20 years anyway.
Yeah.
So like I said, the Chinese are caught off guard at the end of May when the US decide to attack with their 8th Army.
Yep.
And take the Chinese by surprise, counterattack them again, and they basically go and regain what's called the Kansas Line in their push, and that's 10 miles north of the 38th parallel. The PVA had to withdraw, and then it took in a week, apparently, another 60,000 casualties, which is insane. The whole spring offensive that they've launched, this fifth phase offensive that I've been calling it, amounted to over 102,000 Chinese casualties, alongside significant casualties for the KPA. In May to June 1951, the US and US-led UN coalition forces go further. They capture another 6 miles north of the 38th parallel. They capture what's called the Wyoming line, which is now 20 miles into North Korean territory.
Yep.
And takes back what they lost in most of the Chinese spring offensive. So they've been pushed back behind the 30th parallel, behind Seoul, and now they're 20 miles ahead again of this tug of war this entire time.
Yeah, they've got a tiny lead.
Yeah, tiny lead.
Yeah, a 1-0.
Yeah. Yeah, they went down. No, I'd say right now we're up 5-4. It's probably where it's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lack of will now. The war is coming to a close because
I don't imagine there's many wills there at all.
I imagine there's a lot of American wills actually.
Oh, fuck.
There's just like the lack.
I actually have the stat here, and it says that there were 200,000 wills in the US military at the time.
Are you taking a piss out of me there?
No.
Well, I've got them. There were 200,000 wills. So stalemate now like truly begins. This period from 1951 to 1953 is what's referred to as a stalemate because all the offensives have ended by summer 1951. There's very little large-scale offensives that happen, but there's constant bickering in military speak on the line. So on the border, there's artillery barrages, there's still relentless bombing of North Korea and Chinese troops by the US Air Force. They've still got massive superiority. Kind of looking like the war's about to end. You thought I was done.
So the 6th offensive.
The Chinese launch another offensive in late 1952.
5 million
the
troops.
6th major offensive.
No way.
And the plan is to push the Allies back across the 38th parallel. They can't be in the Wyoming line, 20 miles north. They've got to be behind the line. It's heavy fighting until mid-November. The US lose 10,000 men and the Chinese 15,000. And while I would love to say the US counterattack, that doesn't happen.
No,
There's no more counterattack.
That is the last
That's
one.
the last one.
China just had to have the last
So
word.
there's been about 6 or 7 counterattacks. Tug of war. I keep saying tug of war, but like if you look, there's like interactive drawings of like the territories being controlled on like a map.
Yeah.
And you can see it's like blue, red, blue, red, blue, red.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Eisenhower then comes in as president in January 1953 and wants to put an end to the war. Stalin then dies on the 5th of March 1953.
God, so many
And then-
things happening at the same time.
And the new Politburo want to end the war too, which upsets Mao because he can't fight about the Soviets. And if Mao can't fight, and Kim Il-sung can't fight, and if the US don't want to fight, South Korea can't fight, the war's fizzling out.
Yeah.
And on the 27th of July 1953, an armistice is signed calling to an end the 3 years of the Korean War. So
Interesting.
this crazy war that really only
It
lasts...
could have gone for longer then. If Eisenhower was more pro-war and Stalin had survived for a few more years, the war could have gone. It could have gone way bloodier.
Yeah, but I mean...
Really interesting.
but
I mean, it was
reality,
always fizzling, of course.
In reality, though, like, the war only lasted about a year. Like, it was a short war, but it was so brutal.
Yeah.
With like millions of people dying. Here's the craziest thing from this armistice negotiation. While Kim Il-sung signed it, and Mao signed it, and the Politburo signed it, and so did Truman, Syngman Rhee never signed it. So there's been no peace treaty.
Yeah.
And North Korea and South Korea are technically still at war.
Still at war, yes. You're absolutely, that's so true. I completely forgot about that. So technically, the two nations are constantly at war. It's just that they are in a ceasefire for 80 years or however long.
But importantly, the prisoners of war and the dead are exchanged, and that's like the main thing that comes from this armistice.
Yeah.
So that's where the story ends, the war ends. In the last 70 years or so, there's been sanctions against North Korea. It's now like an international pariah state.
Yeah.
There's been like border skirmishes in like the 60s and 70s, but like nothing on the same scale. And the question that I ask you now, Joe, which is not really a question, it's more rhetorical, but you got to ask yourself, what's the point?
Was it worth it?
What was the fucking point?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's history. It's in the annals of history, and it's not. Of course, when is war ever really the point? But what I do.
Defeating Hitler is a good point, right?
Yeah, but the war started because of Hitler. So yes, of course, but it's not like like in general.
Yeah, I guess
that's a different example. They're completely different. You could a better example would be
I guess
World War
like,
One would be one.
The result of the war, though, of like World War Two, was a clear goal to get to. The result of the Korean War is like incredibly obscure. If you unify the country, maybe that's like a meaningful objective to cling on to and reach out for. But like, it's just like ideologies fighting ideologies with like suffering as a byproduct of that. And the 50s was a fucking strange time.
50s is a crazy time, yeah. I just find it so interesting, the Korean War, in the sense that this moment in history completely changes this area of the world, in the sense that if you look at North Korea and South Korea today, my God, are they two completely different nations? I mean, South Korea, you see like the neon buildings of Seoul.
Desperate to go there.
And you have been. I remember you saying for a few times that you wanted to go to Seoul. And
I wanted to teach English there.
Yeah, and I think that it's a fascinating culture and a really interesting place. And then you've got North Korea, which is literally, less than 100 years ago, they would have been completely similar in culture. And now North Korea is just the most bizarre place in the world, like literally like a place you can't fathom unless you actually go there yourself and witness it for yourself. I'm saying that as if I've been. I just mean like it's so weird to be there that it's like to think that they were actually the same place less than 100 years ago is mind blowing. Really,
North Korea was actually the industrial powerhouse of the like when Korea was joined. The North was like the industrial base of the country, whereas the South was like the agricultural base of the country. Kind of weird going off from that. I guess like the landscape in North Korea is not suitable to run a country on, and you need both parts to make it work. But South Koreans have adapted well, and they've leaned to the West. Whereas the North Koreans have had sanctions, and they've leaned further to Russia.
The North Koreans have gone fully into we are the most isolationist place ever. Everyone hates us, and with the exception of a small amount of help from Russia and China, we basically accept no one, and we are very, very, very careful about how we portray to the world and how we teach our kids, how we indoctrinate our children into this, believing our leaders are gods essentially. And like it's honestly, it's just North Korea. It's
mind-boggling, isn't it?
Again, that deserves an episode of its own.
For sure.
The history of North Korea, because my word, what a random place.
Season 4.
Season 4. We're getting season 4, aren't we?
We are. We out here. We're doing. You're doing niche back home, and we're out here grafting.
We're plugging. We're plugging, baby.
And just to quickly fire off a stat, which is absolutely horrible, but I love the morbidness of war. Don't love it. I hate it, but I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah.
Almost 3 million civilians are killed it's the deadliest conflict of the Cold War era, with civilians being as high in the casualty list.
Wait, ahead of Vietnam?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty sure it is anyway. And apparently it's the highest rate of basically most, I don't know what, like how many conflicts they attach in this data, but like it has one of the highest casualties as civilians rate of like any war. World War II was 42% civilians killed to combatants. Vietnam War was 46% civilians to combatants. The Korean War is 70% of the dead, of the total dead, are civilians, and that's because there's massive famines and diseases that ravage the country, and the fire bombing of basically the entire peninsula by the US Air Force. Basically, every city in Korea on both sides is destroyed.
Bloody hell.
And yeah, that's where we are today, and I think it's really interesting as well in the modern day to talk about this because it shows how China is a superpower capable of fighting the US. Which they are today. They're the second biggest country in the world. Militarily, economically, maybe technologically. It espouses the difference between North and South Korea, which you just said. Like North Korea, this pariah, crazy state, and South Korea, this like leftist, democratic-leaning Western sort of country. And with the Russian-Ukraine war happening right now, and the potential for a Chinese invasion into Taiwan, it feels like a good time to like revisit it and sort of like learn or at least ponder on what happened.
Interestingly, the Korean War is probably one of the best examples we have of what a war in Asia would kind of look like today. Not necessarily in terms of the makeup, the fighting, but in terms of how nations would treat it, how the USA would treat it, how would they react to it, what would they do. It's like this, a civil war that kind of echoes in what is current day politics.
Yeah. And that's it. That's all I got for Korean War.
Nice, good
job.
job.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Well done, mate.
Everyone listening at home enjoyed it too.
Yes, let's hope so. They've all tuned out. It's just us talking. There's no one listening to this bit. If you made it this far, well done. But
our average consumption is like 90%. So
is it actually 90%?
On some videos. So on the Chernobyl one, it was 92%.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Thank you for watching. We appreciate all your support.
We really do.
We're loving doing this. I don't know why I'm getting all philosophical. Thank you for joining us this episode.
We are loving doing this, and thank you all. We'll be back next episode with a topic that we haven't decided yet, so we're actually not sure exactly where we're going to go, but it'll be something fun.
I want Joe to do Rise of the Nazis though, so put pressure on him in the comments if you'd like him to as well.
Yes, put pressure on me to do the Nazis. Great shout.
And thank you, Crate Brewery, as well, for your lovely beers.
Thank you very much. All right, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.